It's a pleasure to be with you here, and I would like to thank the Counter-Extremism Project for inviting me to share about our strategy and about the approach the European Commission has with regards to anti-Semitism, but also with regards to extremism. And as you know, in a way they are linked. When Alexander Ritzmann and I met before the summer to discuss what was then a draft of the 5-point guide on identifying and disrupting key anti-Semitic actors, we immediately agreed on two things. First, it is important to focus on the actors, and very often there is not enough focus on who is actually behind incidents. And in particular, for example, we saw this with regards to the situation in universities where it might have started originally as protests that are fully within freedom of speech, but then quickly was used, including by foreign actors, as means to spread anti-Semitism, to spread violence, and to certainly cross over the red line with regards to freedom of speech. And the second aspect is to focus on the celebrations that happened on the 7th and 8th of October in many of the European cities. And we saw the celebrations of the horrific Hamas attacks at a time when Israel was still busy getting terrorists off their territory and had not yet entered Gaza. So there was definitely something different behind than the justification that is often given now with regards to actions, namely the war in Gaza. On a personal note, I can say that we projected the Israeli flag on the Parlement, the EU headquarters, on the 7th of October in the evening. And when I went to see it with a colleague in the evening, 10 o'clock at night, we witnessed already then a car Corso passing in front of the Parlement building, yelling, "Fuck Israel," and even more drastic expressions. So also here, this opposition to anything to do with Israel, even on a day which had seen the worst pogrom of Jews since the Holocaust, was very evident. The Hamas attacks, it was already said, were the most lethal attacks on Jews since the Holocaust in one day. And they have led to levels of anti-Semitism in Europe not witnessed since the founding of the EU. It's a true crisis. We have seen scenes of hatred we hope never to see again. Stars of David spray painted on homes of Jews, arson attacks on Jewish communities and synagogues, and attacks on Jewish students. Most importantly, we've witnessed a lack of compass among many politicians, authorities, civil society actors, women's rights organizations that requested proof for the rape of Israeli women in order to denounce these despicable deeds. Posters of hostages being defaced and torn down, encampments in universities which were used against Jewish students where they felt threatened, felt unsafe, and were met with non-action and a reference to freedom of speech. Again, personally, I can say that at the occasion of this year's International Holocaust Remembrance Day on 27th of January, I interviewed Baroness Regine Schlusny, who survived the Holocaust as a hidden child in Belgium. And she told us in that meeting that she had been disinvited by a few schools where she usually goes to give her testimony about how she survived the Shoah. And the reason was that the school directors argued they did not want to polarize further. This is a clear lack of understanding of why we commemorate the Holocaust, and a mix between, and this is what we have seen from in many areas, mixing up the situation in the Middle East with the the conditions under which Jewish life is happening here in Europe. In view of the situation at the time, Baroness Schlusny, she made a heartbreaking remark, and she said, "I don't want to go in hiding anymore." Yet, in the Europe of 2024 and even before the 7th of October of 2023, Jews are hiding their identity. They move their Stars of David inside the sweater. They put a baseball cap on top of the yarmulke. And a Dutch Jewish newspaper changed their transparent envelopes to plain white ones, not to endanger the recipients. In fact, already 5 years before the current crisis, we launched a so-called Eurobarometer, which is a survey among all Europeans in 2019, sorry. And in that survey, it became clear that 1 out of 2 Europeans, so in total 54%, said that the conflict in the Middle East has an influence on the perception of Jewish people in their country. And this number has most probably significantly increased since last year. Cannot be recalled often enough, and it is in line with the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, which we in the Commission use since 2017 as the basis of our work, that holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the State of Israel is anti-Semitic. It is not necessarily illegal, it does not infringe on freedom of speech, but it is anti-Semitic. And while one may hold such views, one has to live with the idea that there is counter-speech and that others call it out as being anti-Semitic. Already before the 7th of October, Israel-related antisemitism was the #1 form of antisemitism that Jews encountered online. So in the last year, I will give you a few numbers. Authorities and NGOs have registered the highest level of anti-Semitic incidents since the Shoah. In France, anti-Semitic incidents increased 4 times, from over 400 acts in 2022 to over 1,600 in 2023. And for all the countries that I will name, and these are the countries that actually disclose the figures, because many even don't record these anti-Semitic incidents properly. But for all of them, what is true is that until the 7th of October, the situation continued in a similar mode as before, and all the increase that we see happened after the 7th of October. In Denmark, 121 incidents were registered in 2022, and that figure increased by over 1,200% in 2023. In Germany, a third of the total of roughly 17,000 hate crime incidents registered by the Federal Criminal Police Office are of anti-Semitic nature. So 1/3 of the total. And these 1/3 of registered hate incidents goes against the Jewish community that represents less than 0.2% of the overall German population. And finally, to mention a incident or a country that was actually on a positive development in Austria, we saw that the average number of reported incidents declined before the 7th of October, while there were 2 incidents per day registered for 2022. There were 1.5 incidents registered in the first 3 quarters of 2023. And in the period from the 7th of October to the 31st of December, there was a 5-fold increase to over 8 incidents per day. So we had improved recording structures. And in fact, in all these countries that I mentioned, the reporting structures improved, and yet we believe that we see only the tip of the iceberg. and that roughly only 30% of incidents are being even recorded. Now, if we move to online, we are all aware that the internet is the number one access door for anti-Semitism into our living rooms. We are aware that the internet, the anti-Semitism on the internet exploded. In fact, for example, on YouTube, just in the week after the 7th of October, we have a 50-fold increase of the absolute volume of anti-Semitic comments on YouTube. And this takes me to EU actions, because already before, and I mean, the whole reason why my post was created, my office, was because we saw for years and years an increase of anti-Semitism across Europe. And in many ways, Jews have been living for certainly the last 2.5 decades what we experience now as a wider society as well. And it was when President von der Leyen came into office that she requested not only actions as we had done before, but a clear strategy, which we adopted in 2021. It has 96 initiatives, bigger ones, smaller ones. Our aim is really to act where Europe can be of added value, create Europe-wide networks, for example, to detect anti-Semitic content online, but also places where the Holocaust happened, a research hub on anti-Semitism and Jewish life and culture, these kind of big events, but then also make sure that anti-Semitic action against anti-Semitism permeates in all the different policy areas that are of responsibility in the European Commission. What was also very important is that we can do whatever we want on European level unless it permeates and it trickles down in the member states to the national level, regional level, city level. Nothing changes for the Jewish community. And so our aim was to ensure that also each member state have their own national strategies. Now we see in the last 3 years, 21 countries have adopted strategies, 19 have appointed special envoys, and we come together twice a year with representatives from all member states and also Jewish representatives to discuss current issues, ways forward, policy. Now, since 2017, the European Commission has been using the non-legally binding working definition of anti-Semitism of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. We see it as a practical tool and certainly as a basis of the work to combat anti-Semitism. We also know from the survey, the Fundamental Rights Agency's survey, that it represents what the majority of European Jews regards as anti-Semitic. And therefore, the IHRA definition, in our view, is the benchmark for promoting a rights-based and a victims-centered approach. To that end, we also published in 2021 a handbook for the practical use of the IHRA working definition, which provides an overview of good practices for all those who want to use it, from international organizations to national administrations, police, educators, and Jewish communities themselves as well. Now, we also engage on a global scale to fight anti-Semitism. This strategy is for the first time that we have an external arm as well. And just before the summer, on the 17th of July, which actually marked the bombing of the AMIA building, the Jewish building in Buenos Aires 30 years ago, we adopted, together with 40 other countries, global guidelines for combating anti-Semitism, which will serve also, including within the UN context, as a reference point to what do we need to do if we want to address anti-Semitism. And so we coordinate our actions also between roughly 40 envoys that have been appointed in different countries over the past years. Now, after the 7th of October, we accelerated the implementation of the strategy, obviously fully aware that the source of anti-Semitism is beyond us in many ways. This we saw already during the corona pandemic, then the war of Russia on Ukraine, and all the other subsequent incidents that followed, including, for example, inflation. And certainly we've seen it also after the 7th of October. Now, extremists can agree on very little, but Jew hatred and anti-Semitic conspiracy is certainly among their commonalities. And so we were very clear in our EU strategy that, and I quote, contemporary anti-Semitism can be found in radical and fringe groups espousing right-wing, left-wing, or Islamist extremism, and it can hide behind anti-Zionism, but it can also be found in the center of society. And I think it's very important to recognize that there are unfortunately hardly any spots in society nowadays where there is no anti-Semitism. And words lead to action. Online anti-Semitic hate speech can quickly manifest offline in hate crimes and terrorist attacks, as we have seen. And online platforms are used by extremist actors to share tactics and call for violence. This poses a security threat to the Jewish community, and Europe will therefore do everything to prevent lethal attacks on Jewish communities, as we just witnessed recently in Munich. But the celebrations on European streets of the horrific killing of Jews by Hamas on the 7th of October, the demonstrations then that followed, that called for caliphate, display radicalization and extremism that endangers not only the Jewish community, but European security. Anti-Semitism can lead to instability in Europe. And it will also reduce trust in state authorities by those who should trust the state to protect them. And that's the Jewish communities on the one side, but also society as a whole. I would like to especially highlight a few actions that the Commission took after the 7th of October to strengthen the security of Jewish communities, because it is a prerequisite for Jewish life and for fostering Jewish life, which is at the heart of our strategy. As part of a communication that came out of a decision on the 6th of December, the Commission advanced a call on the so-called Internal Security Fund, which set aside 5 million euros specifically for projects funded aiming at protecting Jewish places of worship, schools, and community centers. In the framework of the EU Internet Forum that some of you might be aware of, the Commission convened immediately a meeting and brought together the internet industry, Europol, and member states' representatives and their law enforcement authorities to address the vast amount of terrorist and violent extremist harmful content immediately after the 7th of October. And I would like to say that this also reinforced the cooperation. The Commission is enforcing currently the so-called Digital Services Act, which can fine major platforms in case of non-compliance with the relevant provisions related to illegal content. In this context, the Commission has sent requests for information, including on the reaction of these specific platforms with regards to Hamas terrorist attacks and the content thereof and what they did to take it down. And I think what is important is that now the platforms have to show us how they plan to react in the future. Finally, two final aspects. Terrorist content online. You are aware that the platforms have to take down terrorist content within 1 hour of notification. This did not happen after the 7th of October. Quite the contrary, was perpetuated, and which is another reason for infringement procedures against these platforms. So to conclude, I would like to say that we are determined, and I believe that this will also be clear in the next Commission, to ensure that Europe is a secure place for for Jews, but also with regards to addressing extremism in a much more targeted way through the different mechanisms we have. The Radicalization Awareness Network, which the Counter Extremism Project is also part, is one of them, and it will be important to ensure that we counter violent extremism with all the means we have, and to upscale those in the future. Thank you very much.